All right, want to put this video together to help everyone out. The manual is a little bit confusing on the doors and the latches because the design has changed a few times. So starting over here, you will, when you first receive the door, there will be a hole here. It's not quite wide enough to fit this shank in. So you will have to widen it out a little bit with a Dremel and a sanding drum or something like that. Drill the 2 holes to pass the bolts through. And what you're looking for is for this ridge on the shaft of the handle itself to mate with the barrel inside the shank in the door here. So widening this hole up enough so that it will go in and it will contact the metal on the shank itself. And you'll see that the handle is very close, kind of surprisingly close to the door itself. But from what I can gather, that's how it's supposed to be. So it rotates there. The square key on the end will connect to the latch plate or to the latch mechanism. You will have to cut off this bolt so that the latch plate can swing through, which we'll show you over there on the assembled one in just a minute. So that's first. On one of these, I did have to sand down the whole surface because it was uneven and the shank wasn't setting all the way down. So you might have to widen that out and sand it down to get it to mate correctly. Down here on the other latch, when you first get it, this is completely glassed over and smooth. And there's a small dent, a mark where this hole should be. And if you drill in, you'll see there's a metal plate through here that has a 5mm or so hole in it. So drilling in, finding where that hole is, and then lining up the hole that you've drilled with that hole, and then widening it out. What we did, rather, is widen it out to 6mm so that it will fit the M5 riv nut into it. Once that hole is widened out, then taking a 10mm drill bit, we widened it out enough that we could get the riv nut in there. So 10mm drill bit, and then used a Dremel to clean it out, clean off the surface of the metal so that we could get that riv nut in and sitting nicely. And then pulled the riv nut using the riv nut puller and a stack of M5 washers on top of it, so that, because the riv nut puller won't get all the way down into that hole. So stacking up like 6 or 7 M5 washers on top of it and then pulling the riv nut worked well there. For the center piece, this connects to a P-ring that steadies or stabilizes the shaft that runs here to connect the 2 latches. The instructions are inconsistent whether this should be an M4 or an M5 rib nut. Because this ridge is narrow, I was a little worried about an M5 rib nut, so I put in a M4 rib nut. Show you what we did there to solve that. And then the last part's pretty easy, where the cover goes on, 15mm in from the edges of that. You might have to trim the edges to fit with the joggle here on the door, on the mold of the door. But once that's trimmed, 15mm in, drill 4mm holes, and then take it off and widen these holes out to 6mm and pull an M4 rib nut there, and that will just hold the cover. And then you will have to cut holes in this for the latch mechanisms to function properly. The last step is the handle here. This is pretty straightforward. The manual is really clear on that, drilling in through the backside. One thing that I will mention here for these holes, especially this one right here, is running the drill bit in reverse is important, because depending on how aggressive your drill bit's cut is, it can start to break apart the fiberglass around this, and you don't really want that. I don't think. You want it to be as small of a hole as possible and to look nice. So running the drill bit in reverse take a little bit longer, but will make a nicer hole. Moving over here to the assembled one to just show you a few other things about it. So the latch, again, once that latch plate is on there and fastened, this will be very close to the door. We put an extra washer there to widen it out because the screw barely covers the shaft, the square shaft, to spread out the force a little bit there. And this bolt is cut off so that the door latch will swing free. Down on this end, the way that I have the example from the other side. The way that the manual shows, you've got this bushing here and then another bushing that goes inside of it, and the screw passes through those bushings into that riv nut that we've placed there. The problem is that the shaft, or the latch plate rather, is intended to sit on the smaller part of this bushing, but then it can just float freely and doesn't really solve the problem of stabilizing the latch down here. So what we did was order a 6mm thick bushing just off Amazon, an aluminum bushing, to put on the end of that shaft to stand it up to the appropriate height here so that the latch is stable against the rib nut. And then here in the middle, because if you just take that screw and put it here, you're bending that shaft down over an inch. Really awkward, just doesn't work. The mechanism doesn't work. And the cover itself is pretty tall, and so it's expecting this shaft to be up here pretty high. So what we did was use a aluminum tubing, some thick 1.5mm thick aluminum tubing that has an inner diameter of an M4 inner diameter, to stand that up so that it's fairly straight across. It does bow a little bit this way to fit, but then the mechanism works fairly nice. It's a little bit on the stiff side, but I think it'll break in over time.